Terran wiped the grease from his hands onto a rag, listening to the low hum of the city above. Lystria floated on massive pylons over rivers of molten rock, its towers glowing like pale stars in the ash-gray sky. The wind shook the platforms, rattling the suspension cables. Every day, humans walked a thin line between life and death. The dragons ruled the skies, massive creatures with scales that gleamed like fire and eyes sharp enough to pierce through stone. People whispered their names in fear: the Queen of Crystals, the Storm Wings, the Sky Hunters. Terran didn't just fear them, he admired them. They were stronger than any human, faster than any machine. And yet, today, something told him the dragon's attention would turn toward humans in a way he had never seen before. He moved through the narrow corridors beneath the city, his small frame slipping between pipes and vents. The smell of oil and metal clung to his skin, but he hardly noticed. Terran's father had taught him that machines and tools could outsmart even the deadliest predator if a human's mind worked faster than instinct alone. He had built a dozen gadgets already that kept Lystria's smaller neighborhoods alive. None were perfect, but they had saved lives. Terran carried one of his newest inventions in his bag, a small mechanical bird. Its wings were folded neatly, feathers made from thin copper and silver plates, and its chest glowed faintly with a light pulse. He didn't know if the bird would help today, but he hoped. The city council's horn sounded across the plaza. That meant something serious had happened. Terran climbed the rickety ladder to the top platform. From there, he could see the massive shadow descending from the clouds above. Crystalline scales reflected the sun like splinters of glass. The Dragon Queen herself had come. Her wings spanned wider than the tallest tower, and her gaze was sharp enough to freeze a grown human in place. Around her, dragon attendants hovered silently, each one enormous and majestic. When she landed, the ground trembled. Metal groaned. People backed away, screaming. But Terran didn't. His heart thumped fast, but fear was not enough to stop him. Not today. The Queen's voice cut through the chaos, low but trembling. "Where is my son?" It was a sound that made every human shiver. Not because it was threatening, it wasn't, but because of the sorrow it carried. A mother, a ruler, calling for a child she could not reach. The council froze, unsure how to respond. To approach her alone was madness, even the bravest soldiers stepped back. But Terran felt something stir inside him, a spark of courage he had never felt so sharply before. He had grown up small and underestimated, called fragile and weak by everyone. But he knew things the dragons didn't: machines, strategy, and human determination. Terran stepped forward, his small hands gripping the strap of his bag. I think I can help," he said, voice trembling at first, but stronger with each word. People gasped. A human child dared speak to the Dragon Queen herself. Some muttered warnings, others shouted to stop him, but the Queen's gaze fell on him. She tilted her head, observing. For the first time, Terran noticed the cracks in her composure, the subtle quiver in her massive jaw. She had come here searching for her son, but she had not expected a human to approach. He reached into his bag and pulled out the mechanical bird. It sprang to life, wings flaring and chest pulsing. It chirped a sharp, metallic song, but it was no ordinary bird song, it mimicked the calls of dragons. Terran adjusted the frequencies, guiding it to match a faint signal he had noticed in the Queen's son's unique vocal pattern. "Your son, he's trapped in the rift," Terran said, heart pounding. "I can reach him. I can bring him back." The council erupted. "Impossible," shouted one minister. "The rift is death. No human, no adult, has ever survived it." Terran's pulse quickened, but he didn't back down. He knew the rift. He had studied its storms, its shifting platforms, its unpredictable electrical arcs. If anyone could do it, it was a human who thought like a machine, who calculated each move instead of panicking. The Queen's son. Terran's mind raced. He imagined the dragon trapped on the jagged rocks below, alone and frightened. Humans had always been small, weak, and expendable in the dragon's eyes, but that didn't matter anymore. Today, one human could make a difference. Today, courage mattered more than size or strength. He swallowed, nodding to himself, and looked back at the queen. "I can do it," he repeated, louder this time. "I will bring him back. You don't have to worry anymore." The dragon queen lowered her massive head slightly. The trembling in her voice didn't disappear, but there was a faint flicker of hope. Her son's cries echoed faintly from the rift, carried on the wind, and Terran felt a chill run through him. He wasn't just racing against fire or lightning. He was racing against time, against chaos itself. Every second mattered. As he stepped toward the edge of the platform, the molten air whipping around him, he realized this wasn't just about dragons or humans, it was about survival, courage, and choice. One wrong step, and both he and the dragon child could be gone. And yet, fear could not hold him back. He tightened his grip on his bag, checked the mechanical bird one last time, and leapt. The city below seemed impossibly far away. The rift yawned, dark and jagged, alive with storm and fire. Terran's small hover sled hissed to life, and the wind roared around him. There was no turning back. One human against the impossible. One boy against fate. And somewhere above, the dragon queen watched, holding her breath. Terran's hover sled hummed and shivered as he skimmed over the edge of Lystria. Below him, the rift yawned like an endless wound in the earth, jagged rocks jutting from the shadows, sparks of energy dancing along the rifts like tiny lightning storms. The wind screamed past, ripping at his jacket and tugging at his small frame, but he gripped the controls with steady hands. Every calculation mattered. Every movement could be the difference between life and death. The mechanical bird perched on the sled's dashboard, wings twitching. Its glowing chest pulsed in rhythm with the signals Terran had decoded from the young dragon's cries. He adjusted its frequencies, trying to pinpoint the child's exact location. The rift was cruelly unpredictable, gusts of superheated wind twisted around him, threatening to throw him into the jagged cliffs below. But Terran's mind worked like a machine. He calculated vectors, adjusted the sled's tilt, and nudged the bird's pulse to match the echoes he could hear through the storm. He felt fear, sharp and cold, crawling up his spine. But fear did not freeze him. It sharpened him. Every time the wind ripped against his face, he tightened his grip and reminded himself of why he was here. A mother's anguish, a trapped child, a chance no one else dared to take. Humans were small, yes, but intelligence, bravery, and determination could tip the scales against even creatures larger and stronger than him. He had learned that lesson every day in the workshops beneath Lystria. Today, it would save a life. A flash of lightning illuminated the chasm below. Terran froze mid-movement for just a fraction of a second, seeing the young dragon perched precariously on a crumbling spire. Its scales glimmered silver and sapphire, flickering in the storm like scattered stars. The dragon's wings were folded tightly, its eyes wide with fear. The boy swallowed hard. The distance was terrifying, but retreat was impossible. "Hold on," he whispered, voice lost to the wind, "I'm coming." The rift was alive. Electricity arced between jagged cliffs, striking unpredictably, turning rocks into glowing spears. Terran's sled shook violently. Sparks jumped across the metal frame, and for a moment, he thought the wind might tear it apart. Then he remembered his father's words, "Machines respond to minds that understand them." Quick reflexes and calm thinking could save lives. He adjusted the sled's energy routing, diverting power to the stabilizers, and leaned into the gusts, calculating the wind's angle and force with every passing second. Suddenly, the young dragon hissed, startled by a surge of energy. Terran froze again. The child's claws scraped the crumbling rock, threatening to send it plummeting into the storm below. He reached for the grappling device strapped to his belt. It was crude, made from scavenged metal and reinforced cables, but he had designed it for moments like this. He aimed carefully, calculating distance, arc, and tension, then released the cable. It caught the spire with a metallic snap. Terran exhaled, a sharp burst that mingled with the wind. One tether held, but it had to hold through the next storm surge, the next gust, the next lightning strike. A shadow passed over him. Another dragon, a patrol of Queen's attendants, circled the rift above, eyes gleaming with suspicion. One flap of their massive wings sent shockwaves down, pushing Terran sideways. His sled veered dangerously close to the cliff's edge. He cursed under his breath and twisted the controls, letting the machine fight for him while his mind ran calculations at lightning speed. Humans were weak physically, yes, but their minds could match power in ways dragons did not expect. The young dragon mewed again, closer now, recognizing the signal of the mechanical bird. Terran tweaked the device, sending precise vibrations, tones that reassured the child, guided it toward the tether. The small pulse of hope radiated across the rift. The boy's heart pounded in rhythm with the machine, adrenaline and fear sharpening every sense. One misstep, and both he and the dragon could fall. One wrong calculation, one distraction, one gust of wind, and the mission would fail. Then came the first real test. Lightning struck the cliff beside them, sending shards of rock tumbling toward the sled. Terran ducked instinctively, letting the sled bank sharply. Sparks flew from the stabilizers as the wind tore past, but he kept control. The young dragon's eyes widened, wings twitching as it realized the danger was not abstract, it was immediate. Terran shouted, though the wind swallowed his words, "Trust me. I won't let anything happen to you." The storm intensified. He could barely see the path through the swirling clouds and arcs of electricity. Every movement required perfect timing: tilt the sled, divert energy, adjust pulse, reach for the tether. Sweat stung his eyes, but he could not blink. The young dragon's claws scraped the spire again, testing the strength of the tether. Terran leaned forward, arms shaking, mind focused entirely on the fragile thread connecting them to survival. He felt a flicker of doubt for a moment. No one had ever returned from this journey alive, but he pushed it aside. Humans survived where others failed because they refused to accept impossibility as truth. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was action despite it. He whispered encouragement to the young dragon, tiny, trembling words of promise that they could escape this together. And then, over the roar of wind and electricity, came the faintest whisper, a signal from the Queen herself, carried on the storm like a thread of hope. Terran knew he was no longer just saving a dragon child, he was answering the call of a mother who could crush entire cities with a thought. And if he failed, the consequences would echo across Lystria. Every ounce of his courage, every bit of his intelligence, would be tested. Terran adjusted the bird's pulse one last time, preparing for the final approach. The spire shook violently beneath the dragon's claws. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and they could both plunge into the rift's deadly currents. He gritted his teeth and leaned forward, gripping the controls with all the strength his small body could summon. Below him, the storm churned like an ocean, and above, the Queen's gaze was fixed on the impossible, one small human child against a chasm no adult dared enter. Terran's heart pounded. He swallowed fear. He inhaled courage. And with a sudden burst of energy, he aimed the tether, ready to pull the dragon to safety, or risk everything. Terran's sled shuddered as he hovered above the jagged spire, the mechanical bird pulsing beside him like a tiny, glowing heartbeat. The young dragon clung desperately to the rock, scales slick with sweat and rain, wings trembling. Lightning arced around the rift, sending blinding flashes through the storm. Terran swallowed hard and reminded himself, fear was useless. Every decision had to be precise. Every move had to be smarter than the storm. He reached for the grappling cable, its steel coil warm from tension. The spire shook beneath the dragon's claws as another wave of energy struck the cliffside, sending shards of rock tumbling toward them. Terran's hands moved quickly, but carefully, winding the cable around a jagged crag to stabilize the sled. He adjusted the sled's thrusters, tilting, pushing, and countering the gusts that tried to sweep them into the abyss. Humans were small and fragile, but their minds could solve problems even the fiercest storms could not. The young dragon hissed and flinched at another bolt of lightning. Terran leaned closer, shouting over the roar of wind, "It's okay. I've got you. Just hold on." His voice was lost to the storm, but the dragon's ears twitched, recognizing the human's determination. The mechanical bird chirped, projecting precise tones that mimicked the young dragon's own call. Slowly, the child turned its head toward Terran, eyes wide, scales glinting. A small spark of trust flickered in those sapphire eyes. Terran's heart hammered. He had reached the critical moment. To lift the dragon safely, he had to calculate weight, wind, and the strength of the tether perfectly. One misstep would send both of them tumbling into the rift. He adjusted the sled's angle, calculated the tension, and shouted a mental countdown to himself, 3, 2, 1. He pulled. The grappling cable tightened, the sled leaned forward, and the dragon began to rise. The spire shuddered violently, small pieces of rock breaking away. Terran felt the sled jerk under sudden weight, but he countered instantly, rerouting energy to the stabilizers. Sparks flew from the console, a brief shower of light in the storm. The young dragon's wings twitched, then spread, catching the gusts. Together, they began to rise, inching upward through the chaotic wind and electricity. A shadow passed overhead. Another dragon, a queen's attendant, swooped down, wings like storm clouds. Its eyes glinted with suspicion. Terran's mind raced. He could not outfight it, but he could outthink it. He tilted the sled toward the cliffside, using the turbulence to mask their movements. The attendant flared its wings, sending a shockwave that nearly threw them off course, but Terran adjusted, calculated the arc, and kept moving. Human ingenuity was more subtle than brute force. Where dragons relied on size, humans relied on strategy. The young dragon mewed again, tense, and Terran spoke softly, almost to himself, "Just a little further, you can do it." He activated a small energy pulse in the bird, designed to mimic the sun's own call. The signal carried through the storm, reaching the queen's sun in a way only a human mind could calculate. The dragon child's wings flared wider, responding instinctively to the pulses. Terran's chest tightened with relief, the fragile trust was holding. Then came the unexpected, a surge of electrical energy leapt from the rift, striking the tether. The cable snapped violently, sending the dragon spinning in midair. Terran's sled jerked sideways, thrusters screaming. For a terrifying instant, it seemed they would plunge into the storm below. But his mind reacted faster than fear. He grabbed a second, smaller tether from his belt, looping it around the young dragon mid-flight. It caught, anchoring the child to the sled with a metallic clang that resonated over the wind. Terran exhaled sharply, barely believing it had worked. Humans survived because they could improvise. The storm's intensity increased. Lightning cracked the sky directly ahead, forcing Terran to make a split-second decision. He could either wait for the safe corridor to open or push through and risk injury, or death. He chose the latter. Tilting the sled sharply, he surged forward, guiding the young dragon through the chaos. Sparks arced from the bird as it adjusted its own energy signature, protecting them from the worst of the storm. Every calculation, every reaction, every flicker of courage mattered. Humans were small, yes, but their minds and hearts were unmatched. A sudden rockslide erupted from the cliffside, loose spires collapsing into the rift below. Terran's sled shot upward, weaving between falling debris. The young dragon's claws scraped the metal panels, sending sparks flying, but he did not panic. He leaned in, nudging the child gently with his shoulder, guiding its movements as he steered the sled. Sweat stung his eyes, heart pounding, but the boy's determination never wavered. This was what it meant to be human, facing impossible odds, refusing to break. Finally, the dark outline of a safer platform emerged ahead. Terran pushed the sled harder, bird pulsing furiously, engine screaming, guiding the dragon child to safety. The wind shrieked, but the young dragon flapped its wings in response to the pulses, moving in perfect synchronization with Terran's calculations. They were almost there. And then, just as he reached for the final pull, he saw it. The Queen's son was not just trapped by rocks, he was tangled in the energy currents of the rift itself. One false move and the child would be electrocuted instantly. Terran's mind raced. There was no room for error. Every calculation, every spark of courage, would have to be perfect. He gritted his teeth, tight fingers on the controls, and prepared for the most dangerous maneuver yet. One wrong adjustment could end everything, but if he succeeded, he would change the course of this world forever. Terran's sled quivered as he hovered above the rift, the young dragon clinging to the makeshift harness he had secured moments ago. Sparks danced across the panels, the storm screaming around them, and for the first time, he felt the full weight of the danger. One miscalculation, one slip, and both he and the dragon could fall into the churning abyss below. He swallowed hard, tightening his grip, and reminded himself, humans survived because they acted when others froze. Fear sharpened his focus instead of weakening it. The Queen's son struggled against the harness, his claws scraping metal. Lightning arced perilously close, and the rift's currents twisted unpredictably, pulling at the tether. Terran leaned forward, adjusting the sled's thrusters to counter the sudden force. He recalculated angles, weight distribution, and thrust with every flick of his small hands. Each movement had to be precise, every second counted. Humans were fragile, yes, but their minds were sharper than scales, faster than instinct, and more adaptable than raw power. The mechanical bird pulsed again, wings flaring as it sent out the precise signal they needed. The young dragon hesitated, then instinctively flapped in rhythm with the pulses, helping stabilize both of them. Terran's heart pounded as he realized the synergy he had created, human ingenuity and dragon instinct working together. The Queen's son's eyes met his for a moment, and Terran whispered, "Trust me. Just a little further." The words were tiny, almost drowned in the storm, but they carried all the courage he had in his 12-year-old frame. Suddenly, the rift's energy spiked violently. Lightning shot down like molten spears, striking the spire below. Terran's sled lurched, throwing him sideways. The harness strained under the young dragon's weight. Terran gritted his teeth and engaged the sled's emergency stabilizers, rerouting power from the thrusters to the grappling coil. The cable hummed under tension, glowing faintly from the energy it absorbed. The child hissed in fright, claws digging into the tether, but Terran's steady hands reassured him. Humans survived not by brute strength, but by thinking faster than danger approached. The patrol dragons above saw the chaos and swooped down, wings beating thunderously, their shadows stretching over the rift like dark clouds. Terran's small sled seemed insignificant beneath them. One flap of their wings sent shockwaves that could have crushed him. But he moved deliberately, using the turbulence to his advantage. He tilted the sled, letting the wind carry them upward while avoiding the full force of the larger dragons. Every second was a choice, every decision a calculation of life or death. Then came the final challenge. The young dragon's claws were caught in the crackling energy currents running through the spire. If he struggled again, he could be electrocuted instantly. Terran's mind raced. He reached into his bag, pulling out a small conductive plate he had designed for emergencies, sliding it under the claws to redirect the current safely. Sparks flew, illuminating his determined face and the dragon's fearful eyes. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, carefully, Terran tugged the dragon free, the device conducting the deadly energy harmlessly into the sled's stabilizers. The sled lurched upward, and the young dragon flapped its wings harder, guided by the pulses from the mechanical bird. Terran adjusted the sled's thrust, dodging falling debris and energy arcs, each movement precise. He felt sweat stinging his eyes, muscles burning, but he didn't falter. Humans survived impossible odds because they refused to surrender. Every thought, every calculation, every heartbeat was an act of defiance against the overwhelming danger surrounding him. A final surge of the rift's energy threatened to sweep them off course. Terran held his breath, tilted the sled into the gust, and synchronized the bird's pulses with the young dragon's wing beats. They rose together, one coordinated motion after another. The patrol dragons above hesitated, confused by the humans' ingenuity, their massive forms slowing as they observed what was happening. One of the queen's attendants even tilted its head, recognition dawning. Humans could survive storms, outthink predators, and save lives the dragons themselves could not. The landing platform appeared ahead, a jagged piece of rock that had somehow survived the rift's chaos. Terran aligned the sled carefully, slowing their descent, eyes fixed on the small space where the young dragon could safely land. His hands shook, but only slightly. Courage, he realized, was not the absence of fear, it was acting with fear coursing through you. He whispered again to the dragon, almost there. Just a little more. The sled touched down with a controlled thump. Terran guided the young dragon gently onto the platform. For a moment, neither moved. The storm continued to rage, but in that small space, there was a fragile silence. Terran exhaled, feeling the tension in his body dissolve just slightly. He had done it. One small human had faced the impossible, using intelligence, courage, and heart to rescue a creature far larger and stronger than himself. The young dragon looked at him with wide, trusting eyes. Terran's chest swelled with pride and relief. This was what humans could do, overcome impossible odds not with brute force, but with courage, creativity, and determination. The storm still raged, but they were safe, for now. Far above, hidden in the clouds, a faint, trembling sound carried through the wind. Terran recognized it immediately, the Dragon Queen, watching her child's rescue, her voice cracked with emotion, whispering, "My son." For the first time, she understood that humans were more than fragile creatures to be controlled, they were beings capable of heroism beyond imagination. Terran allowed himself a small, tired smile. He had survived the rift, saved a dragon child, and proven that courage and intelligence could bend even the deadliest circumstances. But the danger was not over. He had crossed the storm, but Lystria awaited, the queen awaited, and the consequences of today's actions would ripple through the skies in ways he could not yet see. He looked back at the mechanical bird, wings still fluttering, chest glowing faintly, and whispered, "We did it." The young dragon nuzzled the device, as if acknowledging their bond. And in that fleeting connection, Terran realized that the impossible had been overcome, not by magic, not by raw power, but by a human mind, a human heart, and unshakable courage. The rift had tested him, and he had passed. But the real test, the one that would shape the future of humans and dragons alike, was only beginning. The storm still raged over the rift, but the small platform where Terran had landed felt almost like a sanctuary. The young dragon, trembling and exhausted, shook its wings and blinked at him with wide, trusting eyes. Terran's chest heaved, sweat and soot streaked across his face, but he forced a small, proud smile. He had done it. He had faced the impossible, and the impossible had not won. Far above, in the clouds, a massive shadow descended. The Dragon Queen, her scales glittering like molten crystal, landed carefully on a higher ledge. Her immense form radiated power, yet her eyes were fixed entirely on her son. When she saw him safe, her voice, low and trembling, carried over the storm. "My son," she whispered, each word thick with relief and awe. She lowered her massive head toward Terran. For the first time, she regarded a human not as fragile, expendable creatures, but as beings capable of heroism beyond anything she had imagined. Terran's heart thumped, a mix of fear and pride. He had never imagined he would stand before a Dragon Queen and survive. "He's safe," he said, voice steady despite the adrenaline still racing through him. I brought him back." The young dragon nuzzled him gently, and Terran could see the faint flicker of recognition in its eyes, as though it understood what he had risked to save it. The queen stepped closer, each movement slow and deliberate, shaking off the last remnants of the storm's energy. She lowered her gaze, massive eyes meeting his. "You," she said, her voice breaking again, you have courage beyond any human I have ever known. You have intelligence, and a heart strong enough to defy death itself." Terran swallowed hard. No one had ever spoken to him with such reverence. No adult, no council member, not even his father. And yet here he stood, a boy among titans, recognized for the bravery he had always carried quietly inside him. The patrol dragons circled slowly above, watching. The attendants of the queen flapped their wings, creating a wind tunnel that tossed debris harmlessly aside. It was clear, they had acknowledged his triumph. Where dragons relied on instinct and power, humans relied on thought and courage. Terran had shown them that one determined mind could tip the scales. As the queen nuzzled her son, Terran noticed the young dragon reaching toward him, brushing its tiny snout against his shoulder. The gesture was simple but profound. A bond had formed, between human and dragon, courage and trust, ingenuity and instinct. Terran felt warmth rise in his chest. He had not only saved a life, he had bridged a gap that no human had dared cross before. The queen turned her gaze to Lystria's council, her voice rising over the storm. "Humans," she said, each word deliberate, may be small, fragile, and underestimated, but today, one human has proven the impossible is not beyond them. Remember this. Her words carried across the floating city, echoing in every hall, every tower. Fear of humans would no longer rule their minds, respect would. Trust could be forged where terror had reigned. Terran stepped back, brushing soot from his hands. The young dragon's tail brushed his arm as if to reassure him. He felt something he had never felt before, the knowledge that his actions had changed the balance of an entire world. He had taken nothing for granted, calculated everything, and acted with courage when the odds seemed impossible. He was human, and that was enough. The journey back to Lystria's main platform was tense but quieter. The rift storm still raged, but the queen's attendants provided cover, and the mechanical bird pulsed steadily, guiding them safely through. Terran felt pride mix with exhaustion. Every second of fear had been worth it. Every calculation, every adjustment, every small act of courage had mattered. Humans could survive where dragons assumed they could not. Humans could save lives where others would give up. When they arrived, the city erupted. Humans who had cowered moments ago now stared in awe. Parents hugged their children, soldiers stood straighter, and whispers of disbelief and admiration spread like wildfire. Terran didn't revel in glory. He knew this was bigger than him. Today, the impossible had been overcome, and the future of Lystria, and perhaps all of humanity, was brighter because of it. The queen knelt before him, lowering her massive head closer than anyone would have dared. "You have changed everything," she said softly. "You have shown that courage and intelligence can rival any scale, any wing, any fire. I am grateful beyond measure." Terran's small hands flexed at his sides. He had not sought recognition. He had only acted. But the acknowledgement mattered. It mattered because it proved humans were more than fragile creatures. Humans were capable of greatness. The young dragon nudged him again, then flapped its wings experimentally, rising slightly above the platform. Terran smiled. "Fly, little one," he whispered. "Show the skies what humans can do." The dragon flapped higher, gliding above the city, then circled back, as if inviting Terran to follow. And in that brief, shining moment, he understood something fundamental: humans could endure storms, outthink danger, and act when others would hesitate. They could defy expectations, save lives, and shape the destiny of the world itself. Back in his workshop later, Terran examined his mechanical bird, now quiet and dim. He had survived impossible odds, saved a life, and earned the respect of a dragon queen. But he also knew this was only the beginning. The skies above Lystria were vast, filled with challenges, dangers, and opportunities. Dragons, humans, storms, they all coexisted in a fragile balance. And now, humans had shown they could tip it in ways no one had dared to imagine. Terran leaned back, breathing deeply, eyes fixed on the horizon. Somewhere out there, his bravery had planted a seed of hope. Humans were no longer just survivors. They were partners, heroes, and creators of change. And for the first time, he believed that one small human could truly make a difference, even in a world ruled by dragons. The Queen's voice carried faintly on the wind, echoing through the molten clouds, "My son is safe because of you." Terran's heart swelled. One boy, one act of courage, one spark of ingenuity, enough to rewrite what dragons believed possible, enough to change the fate of both species forever. And in that moment, the world shifted. Humans were no longer fragile. Humans were unstoppable.